Alright, welcome back. Now we're going to change focus a little bit. We're going to be going towards a prophecy that many of you know by now. Psalm 83, and I call it the paving stones to the Psalm 83 war. And also Zechariah 12:3, where God shows us through the prophet Zechariah that in the last days Israel would be left alone and that the nations of the world would be coming against Israel, and Jerusalem would be the major focal point or the major problems for the world, as it says that Jerusalem will be a burdensome stone for anybody that deals with her, and we know that that is the case. Now, if this is the first time that you found my YouTube channel, and if you'd like to download my book today for free, just go to my website, www.bibleprophecyman.com. And once you're there, you'll see the front and the back cover of the book. Right below it is a link. You can click the link and you'll download the book today for free. Let me give you some news first of all, and then I'll tie it in. As usual, what I do is I give you the scriptures, then I'll give you the news, but I'm going to reverse it a little bit. You already got Psalm 83. You know that the bordering nations that surround Israel are going to attack Israel to try to wipe her out. Now, and this is one of the prophecies that haven't been fulfilled yet, and one of the nations that are listed, or the peoples listed in there, are the Palestinians. And Moab are the present day the Palestinians, and the central Jordanians, or you'll see Moab there. And the tents of Edom are also the Palestinians and South Jordanians, but it's the Palestinian people are going to be among the list of people who attack Israel. Now, in the news today, it says Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Evelyn will summon foreign ambassadors to the ministry today to seek their help in stopping this year's flotilla, which is slated to contain at least 15 ships. The sailing date has not yet been finalized, but the ministry expected it to be sometime between May 15th, when the Palestinians commemorate their Nakba, or catastrophe, of Israel's establishment, and May 31st, the anniversary of last year's deadly interception. And I'll explain all this in a minute. 30 organizers from 15 countries meet in Madrid about 6 weeks ago to discuss their plans, which have so far been kept under wraps for security reasons. They also asked that the governments of some of the countries whose nations plan to aboard the flotilla to guarantee their safety should Israel try to stop the ships. Now, last year, around May, we saw ships going down and heading towards obviously Israel, the Palestinians, and Israel intercepted those ships. They intercepted the ships of Turkey. And what it is these ships are going down there to put focus on Israel, to make Israel look bad. Because when you get supposedly they're going to be ships that are supposed to be for peace, to back the Palestinian people, so that if Israel boards the ships, then it's going to make Israel look worse than they already look in the eyes of the world, and I can guarantee the media is always looking for ways to make Israel look bad. So this is supposed to happen around May 31st, and correlates with last year's flotillas. And for you who may not know what a flotilla is that boats, ships coming down together, cruising down towards Israel to make Israel look bad, obviously. Now, if Israel thinks, for example, you got ships coming from Turkey, if they want to stop those ships to make sure that there's no arms on board, like they have been doing in the past, obviously we just intercepted some ships that had arms destined from Iran going into the Palestinian territories. So Israel has the right to stop these ships, but you have conflicts that's possible to come forth from this, and you have, again, the possibility of making Israel look really, really bad and on a world scene, and that would help to fulfill Zechariah 12:3, where it says that everyone would be coming down against Israel in the last days. Now, moving on, there's another Egypt is also mentioned in the in Psalm 83, and they're going to be playing a major role. And you can see this, it's the Hagarite, or today the Hagarenes, or the modern day Egyptians, and they're listed there in Psalm 83. Now here's an article that came out that I warned what would happen when the Egyptian government fell. It says this: the Muslim Brotherhood and remnant elements of the National Democratic Party, which dominated Egyptians' policy for decades, were the main supporters of the referendum. They agree that the election timetable would ensure a swift turn to civilian rule, and members of the liberal wing of the Egyptian politics mostly oppose the measure, saying that they lack time to form effective political organizations. They said early elections would benefit the Brotherhood and the old governing party, which they warned would seek to write a constitution that centralized powers much like the old one. So, in other words, what they would be doing, the Egyptians would be replacing Mubarak, who was friendly with Israel. He had a peace plan that was established by Sadat and Begin, many years ago, and in 1979. And what you have now is Mubarak has been taken out, and they have these early elections would favor the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood. They could install the Muslim Brotherhood and cancel out the peace process, and you would have an Islamic extremist group in Egypt. And since Egypt is listed to attack Israel, you see the handwriting on the wall, because I believe that's exactly what's going to happen. You replace a government that was friendly to Israel, you get them out of the way, you replace them with a leftist wing of this Brotherhood, Muslim Brotherhood, which will not be friendly to Israel. They'll cancel out the peace process or their agreement, and eventually they'll fulfill Psalm 83 while they join the rest of the countries who attack Israel. Now, we've been seeing some other news that shows us that the Psalm 83 war is coming. Here's another one. Let me get right down to the article for you. I'll read what I have, because a lot of people don't like to read, so I'm just going to read what I wrote for you. It says, the road to Psalm 83 war. The Israeli aircraft bombed smuggling tunnels, weapons manufacturing site, and terrorists based in Gaza overnight in retaliation for massive mortar shell attacks on the Israeli citizens and soldiers. One of the bases was a Hamas training site. Arab media pointed out that the retaliation came hours after another ceasefire offered by Hamas, which said it would cease attacks if Israel did the same. Well, let me stop it right there, because Israel did not attack anybody until they got over 50 mortar shells lobbed into Israel. And when that happened, Israel armed themselves. They sent in their IDF, and they bombed the people who were bombing Israel. But yet you have the article flip-flopping to show you that it looks like, well, we want a peace agreement. Sure, they want a peace agreement after they lob in 54 mortars and rockets against the Israelis. I mean, this is really disheartening to understand that people cannot report the news without the bias. And what I'm reporting is exactly what had happened. They attacked, they shot 54 mortars. In retaliation, Israel took up and they tried to get rid of those people who were sending the mortars. Anybody who was in their right mind would do the same thing they did to protect their citizens. It goes on to say the Israeli retaliation was a clear sign that the government and military do not accept Hamas truce offers. all of which the terrorist organization has broken dozens of times over the past 4 years. Now that is the truth. They say that they're not going to do things, and then they absolutely lie, and then they start to kill people, and they start to send over these rockets, and it's going on and on and on. These are all part of the birth pangs. After weeks of claiming that other terrorist organizations have broken a ceasefire promised by Hamas early this year, Hamas stated that on Saturday that it has participated in a massive mortar attack last week on the Negev. Hamas and allied terrorists have attacked Israel more than 125 times with rockets and mortars since the beginning of this year. The year here, 2011, 125 times. How would you like, where you're living, to have your neighbors send over rockets on you 125 times? Don't you think that you would respond? You better believe you would. Let me go on. Hamas and allied terrorists have attacked Israel more than 125 times with rockets and mortars since the beginning of the year, not including dozens of attempts to plant bombs on the patrol road at the Gaza separation security fence. So, look at this. These are the news that is going to eventually cause the Psalm 83 war. Because you're having these skirmishes that are going back and forth, and it's irritating the Arabs, it's irritating the world because of the stalled peace process. Many nations are jumping on board with the Palestinians and saying that we want to recognize the Palestinian state, we want peace. But peace at what expense? Peace at Israel's expense when the rockets keep going in? That's not peace. That's a suicide mission. So let me go down with some other news here. Let me see if I have enough time here. What I'll do is I'll stop right here because I want to give some other news. I'm going to tie in the rest of the news for today, hopefully, and a couple more videos. But you'll understand how close we are to seeing the Psalm 83 war by all the events that are currently taking place in the Middle East.